The senator from Alaska.
My friend and colleague from Colorado, he is always so passionate on the floor when it comes to the issues that are not only pertinent to his state, but to this country. And again, he's laid out, to me, such a logical case on the debt of this nation and why we need to deal with it. But I will address that also. But I came down here just like the senator from Colorado to talk about the FAA bill. And I wasn't planning to come down, honestly, Mr. President. I was in my office, and as senators, we have lots of meetings, lots of events, lots of activities, and photo ops, meet and greets, they call them. People come in, say hello, and chit-chat with you, and you get some photos with them. They're residents from your state. And I was sitting there and having a great conversation. There was 5 young people, 4 of them from Girls and Boys Nation who are here from the American Legion Auxiliary. There is Clara from Kodiak, and Joseph from Healy, and Derek from Palmer, and Marissa from Anchorage. And then there was another young woman who was there, young leadership student, Jocelyn from Juneau. And, just to be a photo op is what they call them. And we shake hands and take some photos. And it was interesting having the conversation, because the first conversation they asked me was, what's going to happen with the debt of this nation? And before I elaborate on my thoughts and what I told them, I first, because they're both related, the FAA bill, what's going on with the debt, it's all related. It's all related because all this inability to resolve these issues are being created by the House majority. The inability for them to function, the inability for them to do their work. FAA is a great example. I know the senator from Colorado mentioned that the conference committee hasn't brought out a bill. What's amazing about this is the Senate appointed their conferees in April. And for those that are watching, the way this works, the House passes a bill, the Senate passes a bill. They're not always exactly the same, so they go to a joint conference committee made up of members from the House, members from the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, and they work out a compromise. Well, the House members, or the Senate members, have and did appoint their members in April. The House hasn't appointed anybody. Anybody. So the battle we're in is because of one person. One person who's decided that 4,000 people should be furloughed, about 80 in Alaska, to stop projects that are critical to safety, airport transportation. And I can tell you there is no other state that depends on air transportation like Alaska. 80% of our communities have no access by road. It is by air. And so for one person to decide that he wants to play politics or he doesn't like something, oddly enough, the items he wanted to eliminate are from states that are represented by Democrats and chairmen of committees. I mean, it's unbelievable. I didn't come here 2.5, 3 years ago to play those games. I came here to do the work that the people of Alaska send me to do. Part of that work was to make sure that the Federal Aviation Administration actually has legislation that they can operate under, because they haven't had it since 2007. I got elected in 2008. They've had 20 extensions to this while they work out the differences. The Senate did pass a bill. We did our work. We did it. We did it with a lot of debate. I sit on that committee, a Commerce Committee, as a member. Senator Rockefeller, Senator Hutchinson, Republican, Democrat, did the work with all the members. We then sent it over. House passed theirs, and now we're waiting. We're waiting for the House to do something. Not one person, because that's not how this system should work, but appoint a conferees so we can sit down and resolve these final minor issues. But instead, the chairman decides over there that he thinks best, he knows best. Here's what happens. Yes, 4,000 people get furloughed all across this country. People who have mortgage payments to make, and probably some kids they have that are planning to go to college this fall, and maybe they're the only breadwinner in their home. But 4,000 people, 79 in Alaska, direct FAA employees. But compound that with the next piece of the equation. Part of the FAA bill is to invest the people who fly. I fly a lot. I think I'll hit probably 100,000 plus miles this year, maybe more, 125,000 miles flying back and forth from Washington to my home state, visiting communities all across my state. And I pay a fee like everyone does in our bill that we pay for our tickets to go to the FAA, who then invest them into making sure our runways are safer, our facilities are safer. It's the people who fly, their money that goes to the FAA to pay for the improvements that we use when we fly. It's not complicated. And yet, what's happening, because the airlines don't have the authority to collect this tax, this fee, they're unable to then collect it and give it to the federal government. Now, it's important, that fee, and I'll get back to this fee in a second of what's happening with that money. But first, without that money, you cannot do the construction projects. It's all part of the system. So in Alaska, it's a pretty important piece. In Bethel, a project now has a stop work order there because they can't complete the project. Now, as my friend from Colorado mentioned, Colorado has a short construction season. We have a very short construction season in Bethel. And so we're trying to build a project there that improves the approach lights, make it safer for people to land at the Bethel airport. That project has been stopped. There's no other access to Bethel except by air. We're 400 miles from Anchorage, the largest city in the state, by air, because you cannot drive to Bethel. So that project has stopped. Another project is the air traffic control tower in Anchorage. Now people say, oh, it's just a tower, what does it matter? Well, you know, the tower's old, it needs improvements. And here's why it's important. It's not only important for Alaska, and again, the people who would do that project, it's important for this country. We're the third busiest air cargo airport in the sense of cargo throughput in the world. We move products from around the world through Anchorage that are produced around the world and produced in this country. If you're shipping something to Europe or Asia and you're west of the Mississippi, the odds are you're coming through Anchorage International Airport. Almost 700 wide-body jets fly through there every single week carrying cargo. The third busiest cargo throughput in the world. It's an economic engine. It's a job creator. I remember almost 25 years ago when the idea from two companies, a couple companies, FedEx, UPS, said, geez, we'll look at Anchorage as maybe our international hub because of its location. Today, it's a robust facility, and many other airlines and airlines use it, and cargo facilities use it. Huge. But again, because the House isn't doing their job by appointing conferees, resolving this, instead one person decides he wants to play politics over the life safety of our air traffic system, the federal aviation system, that project's not happening. So not only are the 79 FAA employees furloughed in Alaska, projects in Bethel and Anchorage aren't moving forward, so that means the private contractors who concern, it's not government employees that make these improvements and build these extensions or lighting systems or remodeling the tower. It's private contractors who employ people who then pay mortgages and buy cars and spend money in the economy and help our economy move forward. So their action is clearly a job-killing action. That's what it is. Now, they'll say some other reasons, but that's what it's doing. It's killing jobs. And it's hurting and going to cost more. Because When the season's over in the next month or month and a half construction season in Bethel, you don't get to come back in November and say, we're going to finish this project. You can't. The weather conditions don't allow it. So what you'll end up doing is next year, and of course the costs will go up because the private contractor, and I hear a lot from folks on the other side over there in the House, talk about private sector, hey, I'm from the private sector. I don't know how many of those guys work in the private sector, but I have. That's where I made my living. That's why my wife makes her living, from the private sector. And they spout off about how they want to support the private sector. Well, then pass the legislation that the private sector supports, wants to see move forward for the creation of more jobs and an opportunity to make our air safer. So again, Mr. President, it's astounding to me, how dysfunctional the House majority is over there, how they're unable to do the work. They complained a lot earlier this year that the Senate doesn't do their job and we're not doing our work. We are doing our work. We passed the military construction VA bill. We passed the FAA bill. We passed several things out of here. It goes over there and dies. Goes over there and they have one person who decides they know best. A lot of those guys ran in 2010 on the effort to open government, 72 hours to review bills and all this other, which is great. I'm not seeing it. Not seeing it. They had some rules committee meeting earlier last night or whenever late night they did it to set the rules of what they're going to vote on in less than 12 or 13 hours. So I'm sure that's been notified to a lot of people. It's amazing to me these guys ran on the fact they want to open government, the system's broken, and then it's so dysfunctional over there. The FAA bill, as I mentioned, these airlines collect fees that then go to the FAA to make sure all this happens. It's part of the fee we pay to travel. Well, now they're not authorized to collect it, but what happened? Several of these airlines jacked up their fees to collect the money for their own. $200 million a week coming from consumers into the pockets of these airlines for their profits, not to improve the safety of the airports, which is the money it's supposed to be designed for. Now, I will say, Alaska Airlines, and I'm proud to say Alaska Airlines, Hawaiian Air, Spirit Airlines are three examples of companies that did not do that. They did not jack up the consumer for their own bottom line. And remembering that their job is those fees are for the purpose of improving airports, not improving the corporate profits or the CEO's $1 million+ checks they get at the end of the year for their work they do. Problem is, we're just like something that happened many years ago, something similar like this happened. We're not going to be able to get those resources back to make sure these airports are safer. I'd, of course, implore the airlines to do one of two things: to lower those fares they jacked up, or put that money aside and work with Congress to make sure that money goes into the fund to ensure that we improve these airports. I challenge every one of those airlines that have done that, because as a consumer who's watching this issue, they should be appalled that $200 million a week that you think or you thought was going to improve the airports you fly through, it's not. It's going in the pockets for profit for some of these companies. Again, I'd point out Alaska Airlines, Hawaiian Airlines, Spirit Airlines are a few of the only majors that aren't doing that. And I commend them for that. I commend them for doing the right thing by the consumer here. Mr. President, I was originally coming down and going to talk, as I got inspired by the students that were sitting there on the budget, I wanted to talk about FAA, but I want to get back to the budget. As I mentioned, these young people that came to my office and they asked the first question, what are we going to do about the debt? Great, it's the question. It's the question of the day. What are we going to do? We can debate how we got here. Everyone got us here. Democrats, Republicans, current, past, everybody. We got a problem. We got a challenge. I came here, I know presiding officers knew, you came here to solve problems, create solutions. not just play the politics and push it off for another day, but actually do some things here. That's what people sent me here to do. I know they sent you here. The same reason, to do the job that the American people expect us to do. I know Alaskans expect me to do. It is no question in my mind why we are here today, because again, the House majority, I will point out, can't do their job. They're unable to do their job. They're not dealing with reality. Now, do I want to add more debt to the nation? No, no one does. No one does. As my colleague from Colorado earlier said, and I know the presiding officer, we've been working on ideas. And one thing that's unique about the Senate is there is an effort here. It may not be as visible as maybe the press like to portray because they'd rather see the battles because that's better press. But I can tell you there's a lot of bipartisan discussion going on, the Gang of Six. Now, you can argue if that's good or bad, but the point is 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats sat down for months. The Budget Committee, we sat down for months. We came up with proposals. We're talking to Republicans. Republicans are talking to Democrats. We're looking for solutions. We're trying to weave through this. The Senate is trying to do this, trying to solve this problem, create a solution that moves us forward. But there are several in the House majority over there that just believe drive off the cliff and, you know, that's good policy. I don't know. I don't think that's good policy. I'd rather drive on a road going somewhere. And that's what we're trying to do over the next few days here. You know, as I think of the differences, and people say, well, why don't you just take that deal or this deal? Here's the difference. They're fundamental. They're not complicated. The deal that the leader over there, the Speaker, Boehner has, is about $900 billion in reductions. It is short-term, has a joint committee to look to the long term. What's the Reid proposal? Well, Reid proposal is now scored by CBO, Congressional Budget Office, for those that are watching wondering what all these things mean, $2.2 trillion plus dollars in reductions. 2.5 times more, almost 2.5 times more than the House version. And it's long term. Here's why that's important. I'm not voting for anything short term. Let me make that very clear, Mr. President, and others who might be watching. You want to disrupt and continue to disrupt this economy? Keep doing these shenanigans. Keep doing these 2, 3, 4-month deals. That is disastrous to this economy. I have heard and have talked to business leader after business leader, from associations to individuals to people back in my home state, and they say over and over again, don't do short term. Whatever you decide, give us certainty. Certainty. Give us a long term. Now, the unique thing about the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, only would we describe long term as 16, 18 months, because that's all we can do around here. But short term, as you can imagine, is 2, 3, 4 months. That will be more disruptive to this economy than anything we can imagine. Because all you do as we shift, and I can describe this because I understand this business, I've been in it, my wife's in it, the retail business. Here's what happens. We'll have this same debate in November, probably. Well, here's what happens in November. This is the biggest time, or for people who are buying, for retailers, this is the most important time. November, actually back to school a little bit, but November through December. That's when people make their expenditures and buying things and consuming and spending money in our economy, creating private sector. Let me underline that, because I know a lot of people think, because they always like to blame Democrats as all about government. Hey, I come from the private sector. That's where, as I said earlier, that's where I make my living. That's where I made my living. It is an important part of our economy. So here we're going to debate, create more uncertainty in the most important time when consumers are going to try to judge what they do. What do? Do they spend a little bit extra on their gift for their friend? Do they go on that trip they're planning? Do they make that extra expenditure? And yet we're going to have this same debate. So long-term is important. Again, how we measure it here, 16, 18 months. But that's better than this short-term plan. Again, no business person has come to me. And I challenge any business person, pick up the phone, call me, let me know. Tell me you want a short-term, and I'll be happy to come down here to the floor and say that. I will mention your company name. I will tell people this company's interested in short-term. I'm happy to do that. I'm not going to get those calls because they know that's not the way to run a business. That's not a way to run a household. And that sure to heck shouldn't be the way we run our government. So there is a clear difference. For all those people that, and I get a lot of pro and con on this issue, calling my office, sending me emails. For those people that say, hey, just vote for the Boehner thing, I'm telling you why I'm not. I want you to understand clearly my position. It is not about he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. That's irrelevant. It's short term. It's less spending reductions. It keeps us in turmoil. It doesn't move us forward. It's all about shenanigans and game playing in politics. That's what he's presenting. Now, maybe the re-proposal is imperfect. I know there's Republicans that have some ideas here on the Senate that want to modify. Great. But it's long-term, has more significant reductions, and moves us down a path in the right direction. It's not perfect. But I can tell you the idea they have over there will not work for this economy. Mr. President, I've probably spoken too long here, but you know, those kids from Juneau and Healy and Anchorage and Kodiak, you know, they had a great question. When kids are asking that question, and they say to me, and I give them the same exact presentation, I say, here's the differences, and I give them the papers that people have done, and say, here, you look at it. And they say to me, why aren't we doing a long term? Because why? These kids are now at an age where they're thinking about their future. They're not thinking about the next weekend. They're thinking about their future. They have a position that we could learn a lot from around this place, I'll tell you. And they made it very clear to me. Whatever you do, make it long term. Because they're thinking about their future and where they want to be. You know, it's an incredible commentary when you have kids who have more wherewithal in the sense of their knowledge of what should be done than the body we sit in today. It should wake us up. The last thing I'll note, and you know, I think about what my colleague from Colorado said about the value of our position in this world when it comes to ensuring that people understand that America will stand behind everything we do, the debt we do, the positions we take. Matter of fact, it was so important it was written into the Constitution that we should never question the ability for us to pay our bills. For those on the other side that like to spout off and they pull out of their pocket the little portable Constitution, and all of us get those, we all have those, and they cite the Constitution. Sometimes they forget sections of it. I hope they don't forget this section. We should never be questioned in regards to our debt. We pay our bills. We stand behind what we do. That's what makes our country different than any country in this world. So I challenge them to get their job done, maybe on the FAA bill, maybe on this issue around the debt, but the House needs to get their act together. The majority, let me make that clear, the majority over there, get their job done, quit killing things over there, from jobs to legislation, focus on the work that people sent them here, especially the group in 2010, but who sent me here and sent the presiding officer here? We were sent here to do a job. It is outrageous to me that we cannot move forward when it's so simple in the sense of a plan that gets us on path, long-term, has better spending reductions. It just, to me, maybe it's too logical. You know, maybe that's the problem around here. You get too simple, too logical, it doesn't work. It has to be complicated, and a lot of gamesmanship is the only way it works. You know, I want to prove that wrong. And again, Mr. President, I thank you for allowing me the time to say a few words and to hopefully the people that are watching us and listening, that they hear the real debate and cut through all the moment in time of politicizing. And maybe, hopefully they hear those 6 kids that I heard and heard their concerns and what their position is. So again, Mr. President, I thank you for the time and I yield the floor.